Cole Bueller.
Yes, it is recording.
We haven't gone
I'm
live
not-
yet. We're just recording.
Anyone?
We're going live.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Great. Welcome. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Friday, February 5th, 2021 meeting of the Baltimore County Delegation. Pat Young, chair of the delegation. We have a packed schedule today, so we're going to get right into it. We have the Department of Legislative Services to brief the delegation on state aid to Baltimore County related to Relief Act funds due to the COVID epidemic. With that, I'm happy to introduce Arnold Aja and Hiram Birch. Welcome to the delegation, and I will pass it to you.
All right, thank you. Good morning. I'm Hiram Birch with DLS, and with me today is Arnold Aja. He is a graduate of the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and he's working towards his Master's of Public Policy at University of Maryland, College Park. This year, he is a legislative fellow assisting the General Assembly, and he's going to actually do the presentation on state aid to Baltimore County. So I'll turn it over to you, Arnold.
Thank you, Hiram. Good morning, Chair Young and members of the Baltimore County House Delegation. We provided you with two reference materials. One is the overview of state aid to local governments report, and the other is a reference guide to access all of our local government reports. For this briefing, I will direct your attention to the overview report. We will concentrate on three themes. We will start with a brief overview of the state aid to Baltimore County. Then we will look at the major programs affecting the county government. And finally, we will end with the aid to the public school system. Moving on to page 3. Page 3 shows the allocation of state funding by jurisdiction. Of the $8.7 billion in state aid, Baltimore County will receive $969.3 million. This represents a $28.7 million or a 3.1% increase from the prior year, just slightly above the state average of 2.7% increase. Pages 4 through 6 provide more detail on the level of state funding in fiscal 2021 and 2022 by unit of local government. On page 4, you can see that $776.5 million of the $969.3 million in state aid to Baltimore County will go to the public school system. The county government will receive $26.7 million. The community college will receive $48.2 million. Libraries will receive $6.6 million. The county will receive $5.8 million in health grants and $105.4 million in retirement payments for public school teachers, librarians, and community college faculty. Page 6 shows the dollar difference between the fiscal 2022 allowance and the fiscal 2021 appropriation. The public school system is stated to get $22.5 million, and the county government will receive $500,000 in additional aid. Turning to page 8, the governor is proposing several reductions in state funding to local governments, which are outlined in the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act and are accounted for in the numbers that you have just seen. The two major reductions affecting Baltimore County are the community college CADE program and property tax assessment costs. Of the $26.6 million reduction under the community college CADE program, Baltimore County's loss is $4 million. Even with the reduction in statutory funding, the community college will still receive a $2.3 million increase, which is a 4.6% increase from the prior year. The second major action is changing the cost share of property tax assessments. Currently, the state and county governments share these costs 50-50. The governor is proposing to alter this to 60% local and 40% state. This will cause a $3.9 million increase in assessment costs in fiscal 2022. Baltimore County's costs will be $500,000. By fiscal 2025, the locals will be expected to cover 90% of the costs, with governments expected to pay $15.8 million, and Baltimore County's share will be $2.1 million. Now we will shift our focus to some of the major aid programs to the county government. You can see on page 12, Baltimore County will receive $12.7 million in police aid in fiscal 2022. Page 13 shows the factors affecting police aid funding. Primarily, your population density and your county population is what is driving the amount of funding each jurisdiction receives. Page 14 shows the targeted crime grant funding. Around $15.4 million is provided for statewide funding, and the remaining $20 million is received by Baltimore City and Prince George's County. Page 15 shows the allocation of fire and rescue aid. Baltimore County will receive $1.7 million in fire and rescue aid. Page 16 shows the allocation of local health grants. Baltimore County will receive $5.8 million in local health grants. Moving on to page 18, you can see the funding for the local highway user revenues. $8.9 million is provided to Baltimore County. Now I'm going to turn your focus to education aid. As shown on page 26, the local school system in Baltimore County will receive $872.3 million in state funding in fiscal 2022. Page 27 shows a breakdown of the direct aid and retirement payments. $776.5 million is for direct aid, which pays for operating expenses within the classroom. In addition, $95.8 million is provided for teacher retirements. For the direct aid, most of the funding is based on student enrollment and local wealth. The less wealthy jurisdictions receive relatively more state aid. Whereas for teacher retirements, the funding is based on the teacher's salary base and the number of positions. It is not based on wealth. Page 28 puts the education aid on a per pupil basis. On a per pupil basis, Baltimore County receives $8,097 in state education aid. Page 30 shows the components of the foundation program. As you can see, the foundation program totals $3.4 billion in fiscal 2022. Of this amount, $423.1 million is provided to Baltimore County. This is the main education funding formula that provides state aid to help cover costs for the school system. Page 31 puts the foundation program on a per pupil basis. Baltimore County will receive $3,927 per pupil, compared to the state average of $4,000. Page 32 shows the aid under the Blueprint initiatives in fiscal 2022. Blueprint initiatives funding totals $497.4 million, and of this amount, Baltimore County will receive $45.9 million. On page 33, you can see the hold harmless grants that the governor is providing in fiscal 2022. Baltimore County will receive $31.2 million, and this grant will offset the $31.1 million decrease in funding from the education aid formulas that is due to a decline in student enrollment. As you can see on page 34, the funding under the targeted student populations grants totals $1.9 billion. Of this amount, Baltimore County will receive $217.5 million. Turning to page 35, and just like other aid programs, funding for the targeted student populations uses a funding formula that incorporates local wealth. Baltimore County has a relatively high share of targeted students, which enables the county to rank 11th in per pupil aid. On page 36, you can see that Baltimore County is at the state average for free and reduced price meals, slightly below state average in English language learners, and slightly above the state average for students receiving special education services. We will now briefly present you information on local wealth and student enrollment, and these factors help to explain the level of state education aid for the local school system. On page 37, you can see that Baltimore County ranks 10th highest in per pupil wealth index. And this year, the index increased by 4.9% compared to the state average of 5.2%. School systems with high per pupil wealth tend to receive less aid than systems with low per pupil wealth. Page 43 shows you the change in student enrollment. Baltimore County saw a 2.6% decrease in student enrollment compared to a 2.3% decrease statewide. If you turn to page 44, you will see that 41% of public school students in Baltimore County are approved for free and reduced price meals, which is comparable to the state average of 40.6%. As you can see on page 45, Baltimore County has the 7th highest share of English language learners in Maryland, representing 8.2% of student enrollment, below the statewide average of 10.4%. Finally, on page 46, you can see that 14.4% of public school students in Baltimore County are receiving special education services, which is compared to the state average of 12.8%. Thank you very much. And while this presentation touched on some of the highlights, please feel free to contact us if you would like additional information. Now we will open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Aja. And let's see, opening up for questions. And before we do that, for folks that are watching or following along on YouTube, that was a lot of information. And I see some of our members all shaking their heads. These reports come out every year, and if you have any questions about the specifics and even some of the programs that were mentioned, a lot of this has to do with programs already in place and the funding mechanisms that the state follows every year. Feel free to reach out to the delegation office. We're happy to go into more conversation about those particular programs. With that, I will open up to Delegate Kathy Shalega. You're first.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here. Hiram, this is my favorite report that you guys put out, so thanks. You do a great job. I have a question about page 8 and the CADE formula. So I know you go through it quickly and we have the information to look at, but so I think you said it's a reduction from last year, but it's still an increase. Can you explain that? Is that because of the formula or, you know?
Yes, this is a reduction over the statutorily required funding that was set up by the formula amount for this program. It is not a reduction in year-over-year funding. So even though the formula funding is going to go down by $26.6 million, there will still be a significant increase in funding for the community college program. It is just that the community college K formula is based on funding that's provided to the four-year institutions of public higher education. So the formula amount for the program was going up by a considerable amount this year. So the governor has proposed in the Budget Reconciliation and Financing Act to constrain the growth in the CADE formula to the overall annual growth in general fund revenues. So the growth in the CADE formula is being constrained. There will still be growth, but it'll be $26.6 million below the statutory funding amount.
And we've never reached that statutory funding amount, have we?
Oh, yes. Typically, the CADE formula is fully funded, but this year, due to several factors, the formula is growing a significantly above the general fund revenue amount. So the governor is proposing to constrain the growth in this formula.
Okay, but it's still going up by the number of $1 million.
Yes, let me just give you that amount right now. Funding for community colleges will be going up by $13.5 million. So even with this reduction, the community college system in Baltimore County will get a $2.2 million increase in funding, which is a 4.7% increase from the prior year. So the increase in funding for this program is being targeted to the increase in general fund revenues.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, because we care a lot about our community colleges. And finally, I know you guys used to put a chart in this report that had total per pupil funding that was federal, state, and local. And I would just make a request that you would put it back in next year. I did actually find it on MSDE's website, but you know, it's nice to know what the total funding is per pupil.
We actually have that. That's in another report that we put out called the Local Government Overview. And we can actually show you where that is on our website. That is in the reference guide that we distributed. That's going to show you where our local reports are. So we can probably do that after the question and answer for state aid. I will walk you through and show you exactly where you can access that information and other information. But we have that on our website for the fiscal 2021, which is the most recent data that we have.
Great,
Mr.
thank you. Thank you so much.
And we in the drive for the delegation and the DHS brief, there is a PDF of the reference guide that Mr. Birch is talking about. So we have the hard copy and we'll keep it up on questions. And if anybody has trouble reaching it, we can reach out to you directly. So is that all right?
That's very good.
Awesome. Delegate Erickson.
Chair, thank you for being here, you guys. I just have a quick question about page 43. You mentioned a 2.6% drop in enrollment. I'm just wondering if that number includes kids that were registered but have been MIA. Apparently there's a chunk of students who are registered for school but not coming at all. I'm not sure if those students are going to affect our per pupil funding formula for the next year, if that number is tracked or considered in this data.
No, the FTE student enrollment is based on the number of students that are enrolled as of September 30th. So so the numbers you're seeing here is based on student enrollment. It's not based on student attendance. So if students are not attending the public schools, that will not affect, absenteeism does not affect the enrollment data.
Thank you.
But as you can see, based on with virtual learning, there has been a drop off in student enrollment. For some reason, less students have been enrolled in the public school system. And that is why the governor has provided the Hold Harmless grants under the Blueprint Initiative, is to make the school funding whole with what they received last year. So even with these decreases that you're seeing for Baltimore County, as you can see on page, just 1 second, if you can see on page, you can see on page 33, based on the decreases that you're seeing on page 43 44, 45, and 46. The student enrollments for the FTE count affects student enrollment under the foundation program. The free and reduced price meal program is affected by the student count, affects compensatory aid funding. The English language learner count affects the English language learner aid, and special education affects the special ed formula. And as you can see for Baltimore County, they are receiving a $31.1 million decrease in formula aid due to the declines in student enrollment for all of these programs. So the governor's Hold Harmless grant will provide an additional $31.2 million to ensure that funding for these major aid programs do not decrease from what was provided last year. So even with these enrollment number decreases, the Baltimore County school system will be made whole from what they received last year. At the end, and the expectation will be that by next year, when the school systems are back in person learning, that you would not realize these enrollment decreases. I think we're just expecting this is a 1-year blip in student enrollment due to how things have changed because of the pandemic.
Thank you. I see Vice Chair Brooks, you have a question.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Aja, thanks for your presentation. I think it was on page 28 that per pupil state educational aid. I noticed that Baltimore County was like 8,097, but Baltimore City was 13,824. That's 70% more greater. Exactly how, and then I also looked at Caroline County. It was like 13,337. Could you explain those rankings again and how that impact that amount?
Yes, as we stated, the number one factor that influences the amount of state aid a jurisdiction receives is the local wealth ranking. And as you can see on page 37, Caroline County and Somerset, and including Baltimore City, has some of the lowest local wealth per pupil in the state. So if the state basically targets, most of the formula aid is targeted to local wealth. So jurisdictions that have local wealth that is really below the state average receives relatively more state funding. So that's why you see the variations, because what the state's goal is to target resources to jurisdictions that has a lower tax base, so that can no longer fund their school system to the extent that the more affluent school systems can. Another factor that is influencing that is the share of targeted students that are in each school system. And as you can see on page 35, Baltimore City has the highest share of targeted students. In fact, it's over 100%. And the reason how we calculate this targeted student enrollment is you go to page 36, it shows the percentage of students that are eligible for each of the targeted populations. So for example, in Baltimore City, nearly 88% of their public school students are eligible for free reduced price meals. And this is a proxy to measure poverty in the system. That is twice the average in Baltimore County. So Baltimore City receives considerable amount more money per pupil under the compensatory aid program due to the fact that they have a very high share of free reduced price meals. In addition, Baltimore City has a very high concentration of poverty, which means that a large portion of their school systems have around 90% plus students that are in poverty. And that is driving a lot of the funding under the Blueprint initiatives. So if you go to page 32, you will see that a major component of the Blueprint initiatives is a concentration of poverty grant. This year, around $72 million in funding will be allocated based on concentration of poverty. And you can see that in Baltimore City, they would get $30 million in funding whereas Baltimore County would get 5 million. And so those are the two main reasons why you see differences in the per pupil amount. It is their local wealth, because the state wants to target resources to the jurisdictions that have a lower tax base. And this fulfills a constitutional requirement, and that is in the state constitution, that it's the state of Maryland's responsibility to provide for all students. And so we need to make the state make sure that if you're in a school system with a lower tax base, you have the same type of resources as if you're in a school system that has a lot of resources. And the report that I think the delegate was mentioning that shows the per pupil revenues by jurisdiction, you will see that now some of the least affluent school systems like Somerset County has some of the highest per pupil spending in the state. So in fact, of the 11 school systems that has the highest per pupil spending in Maryland, 7 of them are low wealth jurisdictions. So due to our formulas and how we are allocating money, we are ensuring that the least affluent school systems are at least receiving the same amount of resources as the more affluent school systems.
Thank you for that explanation. Poverty is expensive in terms of services, but I appreciate all of the information. I don't see any further questions. Anyone that has something after the meeting, feel free to reach out to the office and we'll get the answers from DLS for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We will be moving into bill hearings. We have 4 today. We're going to go a little out of order. And HB 751, Baltimore County Board of Education oversight by the Baltimore County Office Inspector General will be going first. Sponsor is Delegate Eversole. You have the mic, sir. Do you have a panel or?
Dr. Lynch from the County Executive's Office would like to speak after I do. If we do that first before we take questions.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. House Bill 751 addresses the Office of the Inspector General in Baltimore County, a relatively new position that the current county executive created to take a look at fraud and waste and even inappropriate behavior in various agencies within Baltimore County. This bill seeks to extend the Inspector General's reach to be able to investigate and report on the very same topics in the Baltimore County School Board. And to that end, the bill uses similar language to that of the Inspector General for the state, although not quite as severe. There is no subpoena power or anything like that with this one to allow the Inspector General to investigate. If you're curious what the Inspector General might have done before having this power, where they worked elsewhere, I did an extensive investigation into waste in the water system along with the Baltimore City investigators. And they also did an investigation into pension double dipping. And have made a report about that. They do not take action. They merely create reports for people to look at and take whatever action they think is necessary. In fact, I believe the county executive is looking into the pension problem right now and seeing what might be done about that. To that end, this Inspector General, and it is Kelly Madigan working virtually by herself right now. The city inspection group has 16 members in their staff. I think she added a staff member. But they will be able to work on that. And then this bill goes on to say that these reports that she makes will be made available to all 5 sort of branches of government for Baltimore County, County Executive's Office, County Council, the state Senate delegation, the House delegation, and who am I missing? And the board themselves would all be able. It does this bill specifically states, and did it just to be sure, that none of those groups can request an investigation. That is up to the Inspector General. They have to act independently, but if such a report is available, these groups can request it. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Lynch, who I'm glad to see where she is, but I'm sorry we lost her at Hillcrest Elementary School.
Dr. Lynch, welcome. Congratulations on your new position.
Thank you.
I'll echo Delegate Eversole. We'll miss you on the Southwest side.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Hopefully, I mean, I'm still here. I'm still living in and having children who are involved in the Southwest side. So I'll still be, giving my voice to that as well. But it is Such a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much. As mentioned, my name is Jennifer Lynch. I'm the Director of Educational Partnership for Baltimore County Government. And I'd just like to thank you for providing me for the opportunity today to speak to you about House Bill 751. As Baltimore County moves to recover from a global pandemic and address the racial inequities that have harmed our communities, it is paramount that our government agencies ensure that we are optimizing our resources, committing to the fair and equal treatment of all of our citizens, and preserving the integrity of our systems. As elected officials, I know that you take that responsibility seriously, and County Executive Olszewski shares your commitment. It has always been his premier goal to improve the transparency and accountability of Baltimore County government so that its citizens can take comfort that our government agencies are not only good stewards of hard-earned taxpayer dollars, but are committed to the fair and equal treatment of every member of our community. This bill provides an opportunity for the Baltimore County public school system to join other government agencies in this shared commitment. As Stephen M.R. Covey once wrote, trust is the one thing that has the potential to create unparalleled success and prosperity in every dimension of life, and that includes government and education systems. This bill commits to building trust between the community and the Baltimore County public school system. It ensures that concerns can be heard and investigated free from politics or personal interest. The school system and all of the hardworking individuals within that system deserve to be free of the mistrust and doubt that has plagued the system for too long. When we unburden BCPS from fraud, waste, and abuse, we will unleash the full potential of the system, and the children and families of Baltimore County deserve no less. So thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you, Ms. Lynch. And turn off my timer. We'll go to questions for the sponsor. And just so folks know, the county has submitted testimony in support. They did not sign up to speak. However, we're always joined by Mr. Chuck Connor. So if we have questions that the county needs to respond to, just letting everyone know that we will allow the county to answer questions, but they're not going to testify. They have written testimony in support. Delegate Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this bill. I don't know if this question is for Delegate Eversole or for Mr. Connors or Ms. Lynch, but I would just like someone to speak to the lack of subpoena power. Is the expectation that it's not necessary because the agencies are otherwise required to cooperate, or that a report that simply says that we did not receive adequate cooperation would be sufficient to cause other repercussions? I'm just curious about why there's a lack of subpoena power in this bill.
As we constructed the bill, and I'll let Chuck elaborate on this if I don't cover it very well. We discussed that possibility. First of all, we felt that this was a first step and maybe we would go further. But it also, if you look in the bill, you'll see that it does reference the state inspector general, who does have that subpoena power. And I think if something were that serious and they needed to do that, then it could be handled at that level. And we didn't feel like this inspector general necessarily needed that power in the case.
Thank you.
Delegate Shalega.
Thank you. Thanks for bringing this bill. I noticed that it is just for the school board and the county board of education. Did we not put the school system in because there's a statewide inspector general? What is the rationale for not being able to do an investigation into something in the school system, not in the school board?
It's a good question. I feel like the school board encompasses the administration, but that's a technical question. And I think certainly we would want that to be included in those activities. We'll take a look and see if maybe we need to make it, if the language covers that or not.
Okay, thank you. I would like to see it encompass the whole school system, not just the board. Thank you.
Delegate Shalega, why don't you, if you would like to look into that to see if saying school board doesn't really allow for that, since the school board does administer, they are in charge of the administration if it covers, but if it doesn't, if you'd like to drop an amendment, I think we'd be willing to consider it.
That'd be great. Thank you. Councilman John Joyce, can you tell us with your keen legal brain, if we can expand this to include the system? It seems narrowed by that language.
Yes, we could probably strengthen that language. I'll work with you on that if you'd like.
That would be great. Thank you so much.
Sure, Delegate.
Delegate Grammer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would you be willing to consider an amendment to include sexual harassment?
I think it's already there. I don't think we need to address it specifically. There's a whole ethics part, and the language exists at the state level, but we didn't really feel like it was necessary here. I'm pretty sure that the inspector could investigate sexual harassment without us putting the language in specifically. If we begin to put in specific language, then it seems to eliminate other things.
Right.
By definition.
All right, thanks so much.
And Delegate, this is Chuck Connor from Baltimore County. To that point, that's really a law enforcement action covered by the Baltimore County Police Department. So that's why we didn't think it prudent to add that specific language, because that would be handled through the police department.
Thank you.
Further questions for the, I see Speaker Adrian Jones.
Yeah. This question is for Chuck. Can you tell me the role that the county auditor has as would relate to the county inspector general?
I don't believe there's any link between the county auditor and the inspector general.
No, I'm saying the role that the auditor has, because I was asked by someone, the other county auditor, why are you doing the inspector? I just wanted to be able to communicate that back to the person.
I can get you a clear answer on that. I can't give you a specific answer. I know there are two separate offices that really do two separate types of work, but I can get you an answer, Madam Speaker.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Further questions for the sponsor and the panel? Seeing none. Thank you, Delegate Ebersol. Thank you, Ms. Lynch. Okay. Moving back to the original order, we have HB 85, Baltimore County Workers' Compensation, Permanent Partial Disability Detention and Correctional Officers. Delegate Bhandari, you have the mic when you're ready. Do you have a panel?
Yes, I do.
Are they in the room?
Yes.
Good. Go when you're ready.
Happy Friday, everyone. Good afternoon, Chairman Young, Vice Chair Brooks, and esteemed members of Baltimore County delegation. And thank you for taking the time to consider House Bill 85, Baltimore County Workers' Compensation, Permanent Partial Disability, Detention and Correctional Officer. This legislation is rather simple, but very important. If passed, it would allow Baltimore County Correctional and Detention Officers to receive the same workers' compensation benefits already available to police officers and firefighters. So far, 5 other counties have passed similar legislation, in the wake of Governor Hogan signing HB 205 into law back in 2018. So this would bring Baltimore County in line with some other jurisdictions, including 2 of our neighbors in Arundel County and Howard County. I think that before the pandemic, this was worthwhile legislation, but that it takes on paramount importance as we continue to deal with COVID-19. Correctional and detention facilities across the country have had to deal with COVID outbreaks that have put correctional officers at great risk, and Maryland has not been an exception. Considering we still don't know the long-term ramification of contracting COVID, it is imperative that we make sure that any long-term health ramification for correctional officer who have contracted the virus are somewhat mitigated by stronger workers' compensation benefits. I worked closely with Chuck Connor from the Baltimore County Executive John Yu's office, as well as Denise Riley from the American Federation of Teachers, Maryland, John Ripley the union president for the Baltimore County Federation of Public Employees, and our Baltimore County delegation chair over the interim. I would like to take this opportunity to thank them for their hard work on this bill and for their written and oral testimony in support of this legislation. I thank you all for your time and would request a favorable report on HB 85.
Thank you, Delegate. And if you wouldn't mind mentioning and introducing your panel.
Yeah, John Ripley, the union president for the Baltimore County Federation of Public Employees.
Welcome, sir. You have the mic.
Good morning, Chairman Young, members of the delegation. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is John Ripley. I'm the president of the Baltimore County Federation of Public Employees, representing about 500 active and retired correctional officers. I am also a correctional lieutenant myself with 30 years of service in Baltimore County. We urge your support of HB 85. This bill simply brings us in line with our public safety partners. And the simplest example that I can give is at our facility, there is an 11 vehicle inmate sally port. Inside that sally port, we literally could have all these jurisdictions around us: Harford County, Anne Arundel County, Montgomery County, PG County correctional officers, Allegheny County correctional officers, state Department of Corrections correctional officers, as well as our other public safety partners, state police, Baltimore County police, Baltimore County deputies in our sally port, and they have a major incident in our sally port. We come to their assistance, and I know it's hypothetical, but we all receive the same exact injury, and Baltimore County correctional officers are compensated at a lower standard. That's simply unacceptable. This is legislation that is righting that wrong, and I again urge your support of HB 85. Thank you, Delegate Banderi. Thank you, Mr. Connor, for working with us over the summer in developing this legislation, and I urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I will questions for the panel and the sponsor. And seeing none. Sorry, I'm also looking for hand gestures. Nope, there we go. Sorry. Delegate Cardin, you have the mic.
Thank you very much. Just real quick. It sounds like you've got support from the county. Is there's a pretty significant fiscal impact on this? How this is, I guess, for the delegate, how or maybe Mr. Connor, how are we gonna deal with that? Is that something that the county executive is willing to assume?
You want to take that, John? I don't think there is a significant one. How many correctional officers are there, John? Would you like to take that?
Well, there are about 300 uniformed officers. However, I'm not sure that that's the right question. I mean, obviously there will be a cost involved here. However, how do we defend carving out the #1 minority public safety entity, and how do we carve them out and not bring them in line with our other public safety partners, both in corrections and public safety of law enforcement?
I'm not disagreeing with you on the policy. I'm just wondering if the money was, if there was a assumption by the county of the increased cost, that's all.
I understand.
And the county has a plan.
All right. Delegate Mangione.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you for bringing this. Just quick question, because I was reading, it says enhanced benefits. What happens now if, say somebody, with the workers' compensation, if somebody, whether you use, I don't know, a broken leg, or if you want to use Corona, like he's, Delegate Banderi answered earlier, or discussed earlier, how does it work now, and what are the enhanced benefits that these other sectors are getting that you're currently not?
It really surrounds the length of the injury. There's a tier 1 and tier 2. public safety in general move directly to tier 2, regardless of the length of time missed from work as a result of the injury. So that essentially is the difference between the two.
Okay. All right,
So
thank
Jen-
you. Thank you.
Okay.
Delegate Empleri.
Yeah, just to follow up on Delegate Mangioni's question, maybe a better way to explain it. You have a uniformed police officer and a uniformed correctional officer, Mr. Ripley, in the Sally Port. A fight breaks out. They both receive the same injury, a broken jaw. What will be the difference in how the uniformed police officer is treated and the uniformed correctional officer is treated? The same incident, the same injury at the same place at the same time. Could you kind of explain what that difference would be?
The
Thanks,
uniform.
Delegate. That's exactly what I meant. Thank you.
The uniformed police officer would move right to a tier 2 compensation. The correctional officer is paid at a lower tier 1 compensation until after a certain time frame. I think it's I'm not sure the exact amount of days. I think it's 75 days, but there is a specific time frame difference.
Okay, and there will be a dollar amount difference too, correct?
There is.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, to delegate the card in question, I have a very illustrative, for just illustrative purpose only. If Baltimore County were to receive 13 such claims per year, reflecting 5% of the affected staff, Baltimore County expenditure could increase by up to $168,000 annually. This illustrated amount does not account for change in the state average weekly wage in future years. So I don't think this is much in the light of such COVID and our correctional officer doing great job and very risky job as well.
Okay, further questions for the bill sponsor? Seeing none, thank you, Delegate. As somebody mentioned, the county did submit testimony and support that you can find in the drive, and I think was emailed out to the delegation. Next on the agenda, we have Delegate Long's bills. I'm just bringing that up because the next two are yours. HB 559, Baltimore County Property Tax, Homeowners Property Tax Credit. Do you have a panel, and are they in the room, sir?
No, I don't have no panels, just
All good. You have the mic, sir.
Thank you. I'm sure everyone remembers this bill. This is basically a property tax credit for homeowners through Baltimore County according to their income. Right now, the limit is $60,000 combined income. We want to raise that qualifications to $72,000 for the tax credit. Given the pandemic, as we all know, the effects that's going to have on property owners and property tax, or people have to pay the property taxes, this is even needed more. I understand it's going to be a big cost to, I know the county executive wrote an opposition letter, but I believe that even helps understand that we need it even more now, because if this is going to be utilized by more people, according to the county executive's letter, I feel it's even more important as we talk about it today. So basically, this goes by it adjusts your property taxes according to your income, and the maximum, it raised it to $72,000. It was $60,000. It is $60,000, and that number hasn't changed since 2006. And there's also brackets according to how much, for lower income people, it's lower, but the maximum right now is $72,000. Now, I would ask for a favorable vote, given the pandemic that we're under. I think it's very conservative to ask for this right now. Thank you.
Questions for the sponsor of HB 559? Seeing none. Oh, sorry, Delegate Vice Chair Brooks, you have the mic.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yes, Look at Long, any idea on what the fiscal hit this would be on the county?
I believe the county executive sent a letter over talking about how much it could possibly cost the county. And I believe off the top of my head, I didn't have it in front of me, didn't have time to print it off. I thought it was 5 million, I believe. But I know that that number is going to raise the number. But again, you know, we want to make sure people can afford to pay their property taxes and stay in their home. That's one of our biggest investments. And, you know, we don't want to see someone lose their home over property taxes. That's why I asked for this very modest increase over the annual income.
Mm-hmm. So that'd be 5 million for this year, the next year, and the following year, and so forth and so on.
It could go down. It could possibly go down. Hopefully the economy picks up and people get back to work. It could possibly go up. I mean, I'd be more willing to work with you as putting a cap, and, you know, we could structure in such a way it would help the people that need it the most. But I'm not sure if we're going to reach, you know, 5 million. I'm not sure if we would or not. I'm just saying right now it's, you know, we need to do whatever we can. If we need to adjust it somehow, I'm willing to work on that. I know 72,000, raise it from 60 to 72 is very modest considering it hasn't been changed since 2006. We could lower that to, you know, whatever this, you know, whatever everyone would agree to. You know, I'll appreciate any advice or any, you know, changes that we can make. I'd like to see something happen though. I know the county is, you know, the budget's kind of tough, but it's even tougher when you have homeowners losing their houses for property tax credits. I mean, property taxes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for that question, Delegate Brooks. I just wanted to make one last statement. If everyone remembers the housing boom and the housing bubble, what happened? Recently, I'm a real estate broker by trade, and it's my expertise field. And as we know what the effects that had on our economy. And I recently read an article from the National Association of Realtors that actually the properties that were foreclosed on back during the housing bust was underreported by 50%. If they would have really reported how many houses were foreclosed on, we would have been in bad shape. So I don't know how that all come about, but anyway, you know, again, you know, with this pandemic, we definitely need to look at this tax credit very seriously. Thank you.
Further questions for the sponsor? Seeing none. Thank you, Delegate Long. You are free to move to HB 573, Baltimore County Overdue Property Tax Waiver of Interest and Penalties.
Again, Delegate Bob Long for the record. This would put a moratorium on any fees or penalties for overdue property taxes. We don't want to take and keep adding on more fees and penalties to someone who can't already afford to pay their property taxes. And this would mainly affect property owners that don't have financing, that they pay their own property tax, pay their own property taxes. A lot of people have escrow accounts that they're paid, and the banks would automatically pay the property taxes. So this is going to affect people that pay their own property tax. And again, with the pandemic, we need to look at helping our property owners stay in their properties. And if you already can't pay the property taxes, the last thing you need to do is keep receiving late fees and penalties. And I would ask for a favorable vote, and this would be a 2-year moratorium. Thank you.
Questions for the bill sponsor? Seeing none. Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our bill hearings. We are going to move into a voting session. And this is the first one we've done virtually. So for those watching and for those participating, bear with me as we work out any kinks or we just roll smooth through it. So the first bill up for voting is HB 249, Baltimore County license to produce hemp limitation. Sponsored was Delegate Cardin. And I believe we have a report from the subcommittee.
Yes.
Metzger, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I need to start with a very spirited conversation, very detailed. Everybody was present except one, and we voted unfavorably, unanimously unfavorably on that one. So it came out unfavorable.
Excellent. Thank you. Is there a motion? Is there a motion?
Motion that we vote unfavorably.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Oh,
And discussion. Seeing no discussion. Nope, sorry. Delegate Cardin, your.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I understand the perspective of the chair of the subcommittee. As spirited as I'm sure the debate was, I will just say that this is an issue that is not going away from my community, and so we, if the delegation decides to vote this down based on the recommendation, we're going to continue to pursue options, whether they be state options, delegation options, or county options. And I'm just telling you that it's an issue that when it comes to your community, you're going to realize that this is something that has to be dealt with. Thanks.
Well, I can appreciate that. I live in a community that has the disposable plant. So I understand the issue, but also understand that you have to do with what you've got to do.
Right.
And it's a farming.
I live surrounded by horse farms and agricultural properties, and I have a pungent aroma that I get used to and actually manage annually for months and months and months. This is a different situation. That's and I think,
and I understand that, and it's also a agriculture with farms and so forth. And I will tell you that this farmer is he's willing to fight as well. So whatever we got to do, I would tell you that it didn't pass.
all right. Then and the last thing I'll say is that we are going to continue to look at the potential health impacts, and if we find evidence of negative health impacts, we will certainly provide that to the committee for reconsideration in an upcoming year.
The positive thing of having such a large county with urban, suburban, and rural areas that we all can see that there's crossover from a lot of the work that we do together. Looking forward to the conversation you'll have during the interim. I see one other comment from Delegate Grammer. You have the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hey, Delegate Cardin, you and I talked on this. I think the subcommittee was very sympathetic to the problem, but we had some concern about the bill. I want to work with you personally on this because I feel very sympathetic about what your people are dealing with. And we have similar situations in the southeast side. It's not necessarily the smell of hemp, but it's the smell of other things or, similar issues. So you and I have talked, we're on the Judiciary Civil Subcommittee. I'm actually going down to drop a bill today. And once I have that, I'd like you to take a look at it. And I think the structure of it is something that could be workable for your issue. I don't know if we can make that happen this session, but I really want to work with you on this to do what we can to help you out. I got some ideas.
Absolutely. And we'll continue the conversation we started. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. We'll move into voting. And normally when we're in all together, I can just call folks' names, and if they don't respond, I can just call the name again. So I think I'm gonna call.
Question.
Sorry, one sec, Delegate.
Okay.
When I start voting, I'm gonna call who I see on my screen, and then when I run out of folks, I'll go through the list of who I don't have recorded and call their names to confirm that there is no vote, or if I miss them, that they can then say. So that's how I'm going to do it. Delegate Impleri, you have a question about?
Yes, just a quick question. Would the sponsor of the bill consider removing the bill for now, withdrawing, rather than taking a vote on it, just withdraw the bill?
Yeah, I think Dana, if you and Lisa, if you want to chime in, knowing that the vote is going to be the recommendation of the subcommittee, I have no problem withdrawing the bill.
Fine.
Dana?
By me, I mean, yeah.
Hey, Dana,
John.
John, you can always just hold it. You can just hold it. You don't have to kill it.
That's fine. I mean, that's fine. We can hold it. And
Just
I
in
can
case
withdraw next week.
an idea comes up, you never know.
Yeah. Okay. Mr.
So
at
under
this
the,
point,
under the circumstances, I'm fine with, one, working with the sponsor, your colleagues as well. I will mention that we currently have a motion to move unfavorable in a second, and we're about to move into voting.
so I would request that the mover of the motion withdraw the motion, and we can just pull the bill.
So I will, Delegate Metzger is the maker of the motion, if you're willing to withdraw.
He's want to withdraw it, that's fine.
You have to withdraw the motion.
Have to withdraw your motion.
Withdraw the motion.
Okay,
I'll withdraw the bill.
Okay.
got it.
Thank you.
Okay. Well then, I'm glad I explained how I will be counting votes. So when we eventually take one, that's how we'll do it. We have one more on the agenda. Hopefully not as controversial. HB.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, you had a hands up. Delegate
I did.
Long had a hand up.
Delegate, what's it in reference to, Delegate Long? Just to.
This last vote for withdrawing the bill, I thought we were going to hold the bill. Is he going to withdraw or hold the bill?
Withdraw.
Withdraw.
I just withdrew the bill. That's fine.
Okay, all right. I just wanted to be certain. Thank you.
No worries. HB 253, Baltimore County Nuisance Actions Community Associations, sponsored by Delegate Grammer. Is there?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This bill, as you know, was presented last year, passed unanimously in the committee, passed unanimously, and I think it got tied up on the Senate side. And so it passed unanimously.
Understood. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question?
Stand by. Yes, sorry. Delegate Ebersol, is there a question related to
If the subcommittee chair or the sponsor would confirm that there have been no changes to the bill since last year, please.
There are no changes to the bill.
Thank you.
And Delegate Shalega, is there a comment related to the report from the subcommittee? Comment or question to the subcommittee chair?
Sorry, it ticks two screens. It's hard to find the cursor for unmuting. I just have a question on the bill. I know we supported it last year. Can I ask that?
Would you mind if we go ahead with the motion and then we get to
Sure, and then I'll ask a question.
All right. Is there a motion on HB 253?
Move favorable.
Move favorable. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. Moving to discussion, Delegate Shalega.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Is this nuisance, is there a fine, the nuisance action? Does it go against the property owner or the person living there?
Can you more clearly state your question? I'm sorry.
So the bill gives community associations the ability to make nuisance actions as I'm reading the bill, and remember from last year. So what are those actions, and are they brought against the person who owns the property or the person who's living there?
So all of that is currently in law. So the standing doesn't change. They already have the ability to do that. What the bill does is it adjusts the requirements for what constitutes a community association. And if you remember, this was Delegate or Senator Sidnor's bill, and he talked about the changes in community associations. Most community associations, let me try this a third time. Community associations these days don't have many paying members. So it changes those requirements. So it also changes the bonding. So basically the current law was so that community associations, it just they couldn't use this law at all. And those couple tweaks is what they change. It would go against the property owner. The tenant situation, this doesn't have anything to do with that. That's covered by housing.
That's a bill for another day. Thank you.
Got it.
Delegate Jalisi.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So basically, as I understand, the bill stands now is there should be a community association with no members and no financial like bond, and they could go in and stop or file something against an ongoing development in the neighborhood. Is that the change from what was last year?
No,
What's the change?
So there are no changes from last year. This bill is the same as it was last year. This doesn't actually have anything to do with zoning or development. And what was the rest of your question?
So basically what I'm thinking is I could form a community association and not have any members, paid or unpaid, and have a standing to object to something under this bill?
So there are actually legal requirements for Baltimore County to what is constitutes a community association. You actually have to file and exist legally as an entity. For example, my community association is the
Hold on one second, please.
Community
Kind of-
Association.
We're voting and I can't figure out where we are.
You're unmuted.
So you could go and look up legally each community association. So it's not as if it's a loose group of people. There are actually legal entities, and you're required to file and pay to be a community association. So it's not just a loose group of people.
So this is basically only for those that are registered with the planning department in Baltimore County?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no other hands related to discussion, we'll move into voting on the favorable motion. And as I said before, I'll go through who I see on my screen and check them off as we go. On the favorable motion, Delegate Jalisi.
Yes.
Delegate Shalega.
No.
Delegate Long. You're muted, Delegate. Delegate Long, you're muted. You just unmute yourself real quick. Delegate Long, could you unmute yourself? Yes or no, Delegate Long? Delegate Long, yes or no on the favorable motion? Delegate Grammer, I'll come back to Delegate Long.
Yes.
Understood. Delegate Impalaria.
No.
Delegate Cardin.
Yes.
Delegate Brooks.
Yes.
Delegate Forbes.
Yes.
Delegate Metzger.
Yes.
Delegate Ebersol.
Yes.
Delegate Bhandari.
Yes.
Delegate Stein.
Yes.
Delegate Guyton.
Yes.
Delegate Hill.
Yes.
Delegate Feldmark.
Yes.
Delegate Erickson.
Yes.
Delegate Belcastro.
Yes.
Delegate Ruth.
Yes.
Delegate Bodler.
Yes.
Delegate Mangione.
No.
Delegate Jackson.
Yes.
Delegate Long.
Yes, I have to apologize. I had a sneezing episode.
All good. I've got you in the yes, in the affirmative. Thank you, sir. Speaker Jones. I believe she had to step out. That's fine. Okay. Seeing 18 in the affirmative, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you for bearing with me. Also, I will mention, or if anyone wants to talk about the process for voting, I know that when we have the horseshoe, we can kind of see who's next. I probably might have a different screen than you all, so if we want to discuss how we do that in the future, I'm open to it. We don't have to do it this way every time. I just thought it made sense to make sure we captured everybody. So with that, that ends the business for today. Just a few housekeeping comments and remarks. One, I've got everybody in front of me so I can see when folks make hands gestures and everybody's going through the same thing in their committees. If you do press Alt-Y, your hand goes up. And then when you hit Alt-Y again, it goes down and you come right to the top of my screen. So just a quick, fast hack on that one. Also, if you could inform your staffs or let your staffs know, I know that Barb has sends messages to your all's office. I work for her, so if just let your staffs know and inform you when she sends something from the delegation, so get some answers back, just so we can move forward with the agenda items. Also, if you don't have an answer related to your bills, because a lot of them are associated with, can we hear your bill? Are you ready for your bill? Yes, no, or unsure yet, just so Barb knows where you're standing instead of just not hearing anything back, so we can try and plan out the rest of the delegation meetings. Other than that, appreciate the conversation, the debate, and the vote.
Breakfast?
Oh, yeah. That's a question from me, from Barb, but, I'd also appreciate if you send me what kind of breakfast food you like. I'm not like keeping a list or anything about all your likes and dislikes. I just would appreciate it and then hopefully send you all something soon. With that, motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved.
So moved. Thank you, everybody.